I like the story of the little boy who was asked if he believed in God. And he said, well, yes, I do. And then when the person asked him why he believes in God, he thought about it for a moment, and then he just said, well, I guess it runs in the family. And I think for many of you, that's probably the case. For many of us, we believe in God because it kind of just runs in the family. You know, we inherited that belief from our parents. But that's not everybody's story. In fact, when C.S. Lewis, who I'm sure most of you will recognize as the author of the Chronicles of Narnia and many other Christian apologetic books, when C.S. Lewis arrived at Oxford University, he was an atheist. His mother died when he was 9 years old, and he spent most of his childhood in boarding schools, and he just had no use for God in his life. He had no faith whatsoever. But while attending Oxford, he met a man who became one of his very best friends, J.R.R. Tolkien, someone who you might recognize as the author of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And because of Tolkien's influence and a couple other friends that he made there at Oxford, they challenged him to really investigate the evidence for God's existence and the Bible's inspiration. And so Lewis did that, and it was from that investigation and encouragement of his friends that Lewis moved from atheism to a deep Christian faith. And he went on to become one of the most influential theologians and successful Christian apologists of the last century. Unfortunately, not everybody has a friend like J.R.R. Tolkien. An increasing number of people in America and around the world do not believe in God. And as I mentioned last week, the Pew Research Center indicates that more and more Americans, especially in that age 18 to 25 range, identify themselves as non-religious, atheist, or agnostic. And that's why I think it's more important than ever for all of us to be able to articulate the reasons why our faith makes sense. Remember what the Bible says in 1 Peter 3:15. We looked at this verse last Sunday too. Always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. However, do this with gentleness and respect. You know, maybe you have a family member or a friend who thinks that science has proven that there is no God. Or maybe there's a coworker who's constantly challenging or making fun of your faith. Or maybe you have your own doubts that creep up every once in a while that you really need to wrestle with and kind of overcome. Maybe you've even been afraid to admit to yourself. During this series, using philosophy, physics, history, personal experience, and a little common sense, I want to give you 5 good reasons to believe in God. And if you would, think of these as the fingerprints of God, because they're fingerprints that He's left all over creation for us to discover. The first, which we talked about last week, is cosmology. Second is creation. Third is conscience. Fourth is Christ. And then the last one is conversion. Last week, as I said, we focused on the evidence of cosmology. And cosmology, of course, is the study of the cosmos or the universe as a whole. And cosmology tells us that the universe had a beginning. And since everything that has a beginning has a cause, we know that the universe must have had a cause. And like the Bible says in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4, every house is built by someone, but the builder of everything is God Himself. So they had these same thoughts and reasons all the way back then. But based on our knowledge of cosmology, we can reasonably conclude that whatever caused the universe must be transcendent, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and unimaginably powerful, much like God. And picking up where we left off last week, I want to look today at the evidence from creation. And the Bible makes this remarkable claim in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, saying, ever since the creation of the world, His, that is God's invisible nature, namely His eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. You know, from the earliest times, philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and others, wholly apart from the Bible, have concluded that God must exist based on the things that they perceive in the created world. In other words, creation itself is evidence of a creator. And this is what the intelligent design movement is all about. Some of you may have heard about intelligent design. It was kind of a bigger movement a decade or so ago. But the theory of intelligent design holds that certain features of the universe and living things are best explained by an intelligent designer rather than random unguided processes. The classic illustration is the watchmaker analogy. Now, if you were walking through a field and you find a watch laying on the ground, even if you've never seen a watch before in your life, you could pick it up and you could examine it and you could tell from the intricate workings and design that it must have had a watchmaker. That this didn't just happen naturally. The watch must have been designed, and therefore there must be some designer who created this watch. And since design necessitates a designer, similar telltale signs of design are discernible all throughout the created world, telling us that creation demands a creator. Now, because creation is so vast, there are myriad examples in everything from microbiology to the mass density of the universe, but today I want to focus on the fine-tuning of the universe. What is the fine-tuning of the universe? I'm glad that you asked. And I want to share another short video with you this morning from Reasonable Faith, similar to the one that I played last week, that kind of explains the concept of fine-tuning and how it points to God as our creator. Let's go ahead and play that video.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
So as you see in the video, astronomers have just been astounded by how incredibly complex and delicate a balance of initial conditions must have existed at the inception of the universe in order to allow intelligent life to exist anywhere at all within the cosmos. And this delicate balance of initial conditions has come to be known as the fine-tuning of the universe for life. And it includes certain constants and quantities like gravity or the electromagnetic force, subatomic weak force. It also includes arbitrary quantities like the ratio of protons to electrons in the universe and the expansion rate of the universe, the cosmological constant, which was mentioned, and just so many more. And let me give you just one more example that wasn't mentioned in the video. Stars burn by fusing hydrogen atoms together. And when hydrogen atoms are fused together, exactly 0.7% of the mass of the atom is converted into energy. And that's what allows fusion. That's why stars are able to burn the way that they are. But if the amount of matter converted were slightly smaller, say 0.6% instead of 0.7, a proton could not bond to a neutron and the universe would consist only of hydrogen. Like our entire universe would just be hydrogen, that's it. There would be no rocky planets, no life, nothing other than hydrogen. If the amount of matter converted were slightly larger, say 0.8%, fusion would happen so readily and rapidly that no hydrogen would have survived the Big Bang. And there would be no solar systems, no stars, no life. The amount of mass converted into energy has to be exactly 0.7%. Now, there's literally dozens of other constants and quantities like these that are precisely balanced to allow chemistry to take place, stars to burn, galaxies to form, etc., etc. If any of these variables were altered by even the slightest degree, then life could not exist anywhere in the universe. So the big question is the fine-tuning of the universe for life due to some superintelligence monkeying with the physics, as Sir Frederick Hoyle said? Is it due to design, or could it simply just be random chance that resulted in it? Well, if you've ever tried to build a house of cards, you know that each card has to be very carefully and delicately balanced against the other cards in order for it to stand. Any shaky hands, a wobbly table, or just like a gust of wind from a door opening could knock the entire thing down and the whole thing would just collapse. One person who knows all about that is Brian Berg. Brian Berg holds the Guinness World Record for the largest house of cards, which he originally set way back in 1992, and he has broken his own record at least like a dozen times since then. Back in 2004, he set a new world record for the largest house of cards by building a 15-foot replica of Cinderella's castle from Disney World using 156,000 playing cards. Now, the probability that the constants and quantities that make life possible in our universe could have been set in place by mere chance alone is so remote that you would actually have better odds of taking 3,000 decks of cards, throwing them out a second-story window, and expecting them to land with such precision and accuracy so as to build Cinderella's castle on your front lawn. That is the kind of mathematical probability that we're looking at. The fine-tuning of the universe has been conservatively, very conservatively estimated to be 1 part in 10 to the 53rd. That's a 10 with 53 zeros behind it. One physicist compared it to throwing a dart at a target on the other side of the observable universe, 20 billion light years away, and hitting a 1-inch bullseye blindfolded and dizzy. The universe is carefully and precisely fine-tuned for the existence of life with a complexity and delicacy that just literally boggles the human mind. And because the odds of a life-permitting universe like ours existing are so vanishingly infinitesimal, the fine-tuning of the universe cannot be due to random chance and must therefore be due to design. And if it was designed, as we said, there must be a designer. Now, incredibly, many atheists, still unwilling to accept the evidence for a creator, have been forced to appeal to the concept of a multiverse. In the multiverse hypothesis, it's suggested that our universe is just one of an infinite number of alternate universes, all of which have completely random constants and quantities. And the reason that this helps explain is that, well, the more universes you have, if they're all completely random and there's an infinite number of them, well, then eventually one of them is going to have all of the constants and quantities precisely set the way that our universe does. And we just happen to be the lucky ones that hit the jackpot. And while theories like this make for good science fiction and entertaining movies, in fact, the entire next stage of Marvel's movies are all set in this multiverse world, it's far from science fact. First of all, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of a multiverse. There's a lot of theories about one, but no scientific evidence for a multiverse, let alone one that has an infinite number of universes within it. It can't be detected, observed, measured, or tested. So in order to avoid the evidence for the existence of God, the atheist would have to first prove that there is a multiverse, and then prove that there's actually an infinite number of universes within the multiverse, because there's no reason to assume that. I mean, there could just be 2 or 3 or 52 or 619, any number like that. And so they'd have to prove that there's an infinite number, and then they would also have to prove that they're all completely random in the constants and quantities within those various universes. And what's more, if you could somehow prove the existence of a multiverse, you're still left with the question, what, or maybe who, is causing all these universes to come into existence? It just goes to show you that some people, no matter how smart they are, can sometimes fail to see the obvious. Now it reminds me of a story about Sherlock Holmes. Holmes and his assistant, Dr. Watson, were on a camping trip, and at some point during the night, Holmes looks up and he elbows his buddy Holmes, or Watson, that was sleeping next to him, and he says, "Watson, look up. What do you see?" And Watson looked up and he said, "I see stars, millions of them." And he says, "Well, what does that tell you?" And so, Watson contemplated for a second. Well, he said, "Well, astronomically speaking, it tells me that there are billions of stars and perhaps billions of planets in our universe. Astrologically, it tells me that Saturn is in Leo. Orologically, it says that it's roughly around 3:15 in the morning. And theologically, it's evident that God is very big and very powerful, and we're all very, very small. Meteorologically, it seems like we're going to have a pretty nice day tomorrow." And then he says, after a moment, "Well, what does it tell you?" And then Holmes says, "Watson, you idiot, it means that somebody's stolen our tent." The truth is, the fine-tuning of the universe gives us powerful evidence for God's existence that ought to convince even the most stubborn skeptics. What's more, once you've established the fine-tuning of the universe as due to design, then you can just add additional layers on top of that, referring to the origin of life or the irreducible complexity, biological information, etc., etc. Regarding the origin of life, for instance, Sir Frederick Hoyle, the English astronomer and mathematician who actually coined the term Big Bang, he once said, "The odds of even the simplest cell forming by chance are like believing that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard could assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein." At this point, it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in a God who created the universe and everything in it. Let me share one last illustration with you that I first heard from Robin Collins. He's a doctor of both physics and philosophy. And he says to imagine that you're on the first manned mission to Mars, and your ship lands on Mars, and when you arrive, you see this impressive architectural structure. And as you approach, the doors open and you enter, and inside it's like this biodome where there are trees and plants and rivers and streams and everything is beautiful. It looks just like this perfect paradise that you might find on Earth somewhere. But you notice on the walls there are a dozen different dials. And these dials control everything from temperature to gravity to just anything and everything that you might imagine for the environment, oxygen levels, etc. And the dials have this huge range of possible settings, but each one has been carefully calibrated so that life is flourishing within the dome. There's a barren wasteland outside, but inside it's just like home. Now, you would undoubtedly conclude that this place was certainly created by some intelligent beings. But what's more, you could also reasonably assume that they knew you were coming and prepared a place for you. That's what God did for us. In Acts 17, verse 24 and 25, we read, do we have this verse? Yeah. The God who made the whole world and everything in it is the Lord of the heavens and the earth. This God is the one who gives life, breath, and everything else to people. Long before you were born on this planet, God made the universe livable. He made this planet habitable. He knew you were coming, and so He prepared a place just for you. So together, the evidence from cosmology and creation reveal a transcendent, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, unimaginably powerful, super intelligent creator of the cosmos who designed the universe and our planet in particular to support human life. Now, once again, I don't know about you, but that sounds a whole lot like the God of the Bible to me. Next week, we'll continue to build the case for a creator by investigating the evidence of conscience, and we'll be shifting from a lot of scientific to more philosophical thoughts next Sunday. In the meantime, though, I want to encourage you to spend this week looking for some examples of design in creation and maybe spark some spiritual conversations about those things. The Bible tells us that God created the cosmos so that we would come to know Him. It actually says in Acts 17:27, God did this so that we would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from any one of us. If you're seeking God today and you'd like to reach out for Him and find Him, I'd love to help. So please reach out to me. You can call me at home. You can just pull me aside after church, or you could come forward now while we stand and sing together. Let's sing, church.